Good evening and welcome to the Independence Day webinar 2024. This is the fifth edition of Independence Day webinar by Turnip Innovations. I remember the first one was conducted in 2020 where we hosted Dr. Purushottam, and that was also on the topic of technology commercialization. Thank you very much to all the participants who have registered. You have not disappointed as we have received over 1300 registrations for this webinar. Thank you to Qualcomm and the L2 Pro platform for supporting this massive live event. So every year we conduct the Independence Day webinar, and we select a very pertinent topic, and we host a very eminent guest to share their views on the said topic. So this year the theme of the event is creating IP-led academic spin-offs. The way the patenting activity is growing in India, we thought that this is an important topic at an important time. The next big metric for academia is IPs that are commercialized and the spin offs that are created. So, to talk about that more, let me introduce you to Mr. Nitin Sharma, who is the Senior Director and Patent and Technology Counsel at Qualcomm. Mr. Nitin Sharma, he has 27 years experience in software and wireless communication industry in the fields of engineering, management, and intellectual property rights. He currently leads various intellectual property initiatives at Qualcomm India. The key responsibilities include India Patent Prosecution Strategy, 5G AI ML, technology patent portfolio management, IP education, and driving initiatives around managing innovation in the organization. He works with R&D and engineering teams to identify and protect intellectual property. He holds a bachelor degree in computer science and engineering. He has an LLB, LLM, and a postgraduate diploma in patent law from Nalsar, Hyderabad. He's a registered patent agent in India. So Nitin, he has a extensive global experience in software development in various technical areas like e-commerce, wireless, embedded operating systems. He has led large multi-site teams developing software products and led global teams responsible for engineering support to customer products. He has worked with Tata, Elxsi, LG Electronics, and consulted various big organizations. He's currently employed with Qualcomm for more than 19 years. So Nitin, he's also a world-renowned leading IP strategist. In 2023, IM Magazine, one of the most respected global law magazines, added him to the IP Strategists of the Year in 2023. So Nitin is a passionate about advocating the importance of IP in India, and in particular to academic institutions and startups. He also provides guidance to startups and entrepreneurs on IP strategy. So with this, let me welcome on stage Nitin. Thank you very much for joining us. The stage
Uh,
is yours, and we are looking forward to hear on this important topic of creating IP-led academic spin-offs.
Namaskar, everyone. A really warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining today's session. As Rahul said, today we're gonna share some thoughts on IP-led academic spin-offs. I think it's a great topic with what's happening all around in India. I think there's a lot of interest, growing interest in this space. Um, 30 minutes is a bit short of time, is a little less time to cover this vast topic, but we'll try our best to share some initial thoughts and then maybe we can dive more deeper in the Q&A session later. So, yeah, so basically, today what we want to cover is, you know, around the IP-led spin-offs. There's been a lot of government push on increasing R&D and creating intellectual property in India, right? Over past few years, a lot of emphasis has been given on creating IP, right? And we see a lot of academic institutes making good efforts in creating that. Now, with latest change in the NIF ranking criteria, there is a focus which has been shifted towards commercialization of IP. Right? There's a lot of ground needs to be covered, although in this space. When it comes to commercialization of IP, most of the time people talk about, licensing the IP assets to another entity. Right? While licensing is a great way to commercialize IP assets, universities that focus on R&D should also look at IP-led academic spin-offs as a viable and very important alternative for commercializing their IP assets. So let's first look at you know what are the IP-led academic spin-offs. Now there are some key characteristics that differentiate the regular startups from IP-led academic spin-offs, right? The first one is that the origin of innovation is from a parent organization, which is a university or academic institute, right? That's the first differentiation. The university spin-off must be a separate legal entity and not an extension or controlled body of the university, right? That's another key aspect, that it is an independent legal entity, right? It's an independent organization which is not controlled by the university. The spin-off or the startup must exploit knowledge produced from the research or the academic pursuits from the parent university, right? Um, a lot of times you'll hear that there are startups which are created by, or um, are created by the alumni of the university, right? While the universities might support them, provide them ecosystem support, etc. They typically may not be classified as IP-led academic spin-offs, primarily because it does not use the research output or the innovations that have come out from the university. And we'll take a look at the example in subsequent slides. The last but not the least, the spin-off should be aimed at a profit generation or commercialization of the technology, right? So it's a for-profit entity. It's not that the research output has been used for non-profit purposes and all that. So these are primarily the key differentiating factors between IP-led academic spin-off versus the regular startups that are either incubated by the university or the academic institute. Let's quickly look at why we would consider these, or why university should consider this, right? The first thing is about enabling the economic development, right? Creating a spin-off creates new business opportunity because you're looking at developing a new product, maybe a new market, or commercializing a new technology. So it's always about creating a business opportunity around an innovation, and therefore that didn't exist earlier. The second important thing is that it has a multiplier effect on local economic activities, right? If you see the examples of university-led spin-offs, they have typically supported a lot of economic activities around the local community, right? It also acts as a catalyst to create a cluster of competencies around the technology space in which the university is, in the areas where the spin-offs have come up with, right? And that's typically because university is where the spin-offs have come out, or where these innovations have come out. They become the center of excellence around that technology space, and therefore you will see multiple, either the startups have come out, or the auxiliary, technology companies, support companies, or services have come out. So you would typically see the benefit there. Next, around the commercialization of university technologies, right? At times you see that the research is so fundamental, or it's so different from the existing state of the art, that the existing companies may not be willing to take up or license those technologies. And that's where the startups comes in, or the spin-offs come in, and they help in commercializing those kind of technologies, which are typically having high uncertainties with respect to the market acceptance or product readiness, etc. Right? It's also an effective way to involve inventors in the process of commercialization, right? The alternative to spin-off is to license the technology to the industry, and most often the inventors are not involved in the next step of the technology, right? Which could, involving inventors in the process of commercialization could be a very, very important or very effective way towards the commercialization, right? The other thing is that when you license it to the companies, a lot of times the companies are driven by their own business needs, right? So you might see that some some companies, when they take up the technology, uh, they may have a conflicting requirements, wherein they might say that, hey, why I do, I may not have enough market or enough resources to put on this product, uh, and if I put my resources into my existing product where I'm already generating a lot of revenue, then I can increase that revenue rather than focusing on this new product for which I might have to create a market or something like that. So with the changing business requirements, that could change, and hence, even though they would have licensed it thinking that they will spend some time and effort in commercializing it, but the business requirement changed, and hence the change, hence the focus changed. Versus if you have a startup which is focused on this IP that you've created, then there is a good chance that they would have proper plan and focus to ensure that the technology is commercialized. Last but not the least, the startups typically provide a lot better incentives to inventors through the equities and other benefits, as compared to a licensing a share in the licensing revenue that's coming, right. A classic example I can give is how the Intel was formed, right. The inventors were actually working in Fairchild, but there they did not have the equity options, right? So they were not receiving any equity from the startup Fairchild, and so they came out and then they created their own company, Intel, where they had equity options for the inventors, and that kind of shows that these kind of incentives are really important for inventors. The other very important reason for creating spin-offs is that it really helps in university research and teaching, right. It attracts and retains the better talent. There's very good example of Indian University wherein the professors are really talented, and they may not want to go and work in one of the premier institutes, but they want to work in this because there they get a lot of freedom to create projects on their own, or research projects, and and create spin-offs. So it's actually a great way to attract talent. Also, if your spin-off has become successful in commercializing a product based on your technology, then there is a regular income that comes back to the university, which can be then flowed back into the research and teaching activities. It raises the profile of the university in terms of the contribution that it's making, and therefore, uh, you know, uh, nothing better than an example of a successful spin-off or a startup coming out of the university to showcase the leadership that university has in research and teaching space. Right. Quickly looking at challenges that we face, although it looks all great, but then of course it's not easy. And if you look at the number of spin-offs that have come out from Stanford University in last 45 years, like let's say from 65 to 2020, it's only, or it's about 220 plus or so, as compared to more than 5,000 plus regular startups that have come out from those universities, right? So there are challenges. That's why, although Stanford is able to do 4 or 5 such startups per year, it's still a lot lesser than the regular startups that comes out, right? One of the bigger challenge there is ensuring that the technology that has come out from the research lab is able to survive the market ruggedness, right? Because a classic example I can give is the commercialization of Polaroid technology, right? We all know about Polaroid cameras. I think if you read the history of how the whole history of the journey of this technology from the lab to the actual Polaroid camera, you will really appreciate the kind of challenges that a technology which has been developed in the lab, you'll appreciate that what could be the challenges in commercializing it, right? So that's one of the bigger challenges that you see in IP-led academic spin-offs. The other thing is with respect to the market viability and adaptability and acceptability at the customer end, right? Now, researchers are great technologists. They come out with great technologies. Sometimes it's futuristic, right? Sometimes the technology arrives earlier than the market, right? And so a lot of times you see that the product either is too early, or it has not really figured out the market acceptability of that particular technology. So that's the other challenge we see, and there are many examples, of such market validation, lack of market validation rather. The other thing is about funding, right? To gain the confidence of investors that yes, this particular technology will survive the test of the market, and you will see a successful product. I think it takes a lot of effort to convince the investors, and therefore securing sufficient capital to allow you to migrate the technology from lab to market. It needs patience and confidence from the investors as well. The last thing I would say is about talent, right? Running a startup actually is, even though if it's a technology based startup, I think it involves a lot more skills than just building a great product, right? I think we all understand and appreciate the need of sales. I think sales is one of the most difficult aspect of a startup, right? You need to ensure that you find a customer for your product, then market acceptance, and finance management, and all those aspects that are around running a successful business are required here, right? And if you look at the successful spin-offs versus the ones which didn't get those success, I think you will find that uh, there has been lack of skills around some of these, or non-technical skills that kind of resulted in either the success or the failure of the company, right? So having said all that, right, the benefits of it or the challenges, let's take a quick look at what's the process, right? Or how do we, if you want to, as an university, if you want to start, what are the key aspects that uh, universities must look at to go about creating an IP-led startups, right? So basically, it's a multi-step process, right? Or there are various aspects that one needs to consider, right? um, doesn't really matter how you break down these steps, right? Whether 4 steps, 3 steps. If you look around the literature, or the material on this topic, you'll find some people talk about 3 steps versus 4 steps, etc. Doesn't matter, as long as these all aspects are covered. uh, I think we will be good, or we will be able to create a successful academic spin-off. The first one is for a university to look at and understand what is the strength of the university, right? Like, what are, every university or every organization has certain strengths, and this is the first aspect or first step, wherein the universities must look at its capabilities, the core competencies, and for example, which technology department has the best researchers in the country or in the region. What kind of infrastructure the university has to support the research in that particular field, right? Um, are there any past successful researchers on which the subsequent researches can be based, etc., right? So basically the idea here is to figure out the unique selling proposition, right? Something that makes the university or the department stands out, right? So that's the key point, point number one. Now, this also covers not only the technical core competencies, right? It could also include the ecosystem, right? What kind of ecosystem you're part of, right? Do you see a lot of textile industry around it, or maybe it's the mining industry, or maybe it's the tech industry, right? Um, does the ecosystem gives us an advantage, and augment the capabilities, the university capabilities or the competencies, right? Because remember, we are talking about a business venture, and for a business venture or a startup, the ecosystem plays a big role, right? If you're looking at, let's say, a hardware startup, right, and you want to build a prototype, do you have easy access to prototyping center, right, or the components and things like that? So assessing your capabilities, competencies, and your ecosystem strengths, that is also a great start. Um, you would also need to look at your resources, right? We looked at we talked about the skilled researchers and the infrastructure and all that, but we also need to consider the funding resources, right? What kind of research funding resources are we considering, right? Do we have access to government funds available for research in particular area, or are we looking at industry sponsoring research in certain areas, right? Or do we have funds available at the university itself to sponsor research on its own, right? Now, this is a very important aspect. The funding is actually a very important aspect, and we'll see in the example later that the source of funding could play an important role to determine what can be done or what cannot be done with the research outcomes, right? So therefore, this decision could play a very important role in the whole process of creation of a academic spin-off, right? Therefore, it must really be thought through carefully, right? There are examples in which the decision was made because based on the source of funding, whether we should pick up that research or not, or whether we should accept fund from a particular resource or not because of certain riders that comes with the funding, right? And the researcher or the professor or the researcher or the students may have a different idea about how and where they want uh, this research output to go, right? Therefore funding is an important. So in a summary, I think the first aspect that university should look at, or the researchers should look at, is to analyze the core competency, the what technology expertise is available, what infrastructure is available, what are the funding sources, what is the ecosystem that we are looking at, right? That's a very important first aspect. The next one is to look at what kind of research we are talking about, right? Are we looking at pure research, or are we looking at applied research? Again, both could be very valuable, right? In the context of academic led IP led academic startups or spin-offs. The only difference, or the one major difference could be that if it's a pure research, then the delta between the research output and the final commercial product could be a little bit bigger than the applied research. But none the case, I think at whatever type of research it is, I think we need to build in the aspects of testing and commercial viability and the applicability of the technology in the industrial space, right? And this could actually determine our choices there, right? What kind of research we may want to do to basically with this particular end in mind in terms of commercialization of IP then that's been generated. Now, there could be a possibility that a university or a researcher might already have a completed research wherein you already have an innovation ready to kind of commercialize, right? And in that case, you might have to look at your source of funding, that how this research was funded, and what are the boundaries that around that particular innovation and outcome, that does it allow you to create a spin-off, or does it allow you to just license it out, or does it allow you to do nothing, right? So I think you need to look at that as a next step. So that's again a very important aspect to look at. We are talking about IP-led academic spin-off, and hence intellectual property actually is at the core of it, right? Among everything else, I would say I would emphasize more on this today because it is the core part of the IP-led academic spin-offs, right? Now, what is an IP, right? If you look at intellectual property, it is actually an industrial property. That's how the laws classify it. That's how the whole IP system is managed, right? It is managed by Ministry of Commerce. And therefore, at every aspect of IP creation, there has to be a commercial angle to it, right? Um, when you have innovations coming out from your research, right? it's very important for you to identify opportunities to create right intellectual property assets from that research, right? When we talk about IP assets, we are talking about not just patents, right? We are talking about, of course, patents, because they are the technical solutions that you protect, as a central, idea around the technical solutions. But you also are looking at test results. You're also looking at your technical know-how, which could be a trade secret, or there are certain aspects that can only be protected as trade secrets, and so on and so forth, right? You might also consider creating a brand or a trademark around your research and university and all that. And actually, I don't know if you know, but Gatorade is a great example of trademark as an IP that was created by the university, right? So there has to be a very important analysis of what kind of IP assets are being generated as part of your research, and there has to be a proper effort around protecting those assets, right? Um, if you don't do that, then you might actually end up in what you call as resume patents, all right, or an IP asset which is looking only good on the papers that hey, we have 15 patents or 20 patents, or we have this IP asset, but there's no commercial aspect. So therefore, tying it down with the commercial aspect is very important. That's where the role of tech transfer office becomes very important, because tech transfer office not only brings in the expertise of creating IP asset, with the best commercial value, but also it has the expertise to understand the market acceptability of the technology, whether in terms of licensing or in terms of a product, right, from the spin-off angle, right? So basically, I think tech transfer office is another very important angle to consider, or if a university is serious about licensing out technologies or creating spin-offs, then a good strong tech transfer office is a must, right? Also, there are certain decisions that are made when you create an academic spin-off around IP. Is what's the mode of transfer of IP rights, right? From the university to the startup, right? Because as we said, one of the key characteristic of the IP-led spin-off is that it's a separate legal entity, and therefore, and it's beyond the control of university. So there has to be a proper arrangement of transfer of IP to the university, to the startup, and it should meet the it should be beneficial to both, right? And that's where again a good tech transfer office is there, wherein it basically ensures that the startups' interests are taken care of. At the same time, the university has enough benefit arising out of the research that was done. So again, that's very important aspect here. Uh, and then finally, last one, wherein the university can play a big role is to help startups commercialize the product, right? And that's where the universities can promote, can help startups in terms of connecting them with the venture capitalists, provide them with various other missing skills that they have, and assist them, connect them with the right ecosystem, etc. Right. So all in all, I think these are the key aspects of the process that process of generating an IP-led academic spin-offs, right? You can think of this as a sequence, and sequentially looking at your capability first and figuring out what kind of research, and then protect your IP, and then use that to commercialize it, right? However, the boundaries between these aspects is fluid, or these steps is fluid, right? So when you start from the step one, you need to still have your end goal in mind, and then you need to have an understanding of commercialization aspects, your IP aspects, and what kind of research you can do, and you begin with the end in mind, and then so all these aspects are interlinked, and therefore should be given proper thought at every stage of this process of creation. Now, let me quickly give you a couple of examples on, or two rather, popular examples of popular startups that we all know about, right? There are many good examples, but I thought maybe I'll pick up Yahoo and Google because they represents this. One of them represents an IP-led academic spin-off versus the other not, although they are in a very similar space, right? So if you look at Yahoo, the inventors Jerry Yang and David Flo basically created the innovation, right? Or they came up with this innovation around search. Now, how they did was that they used the university computers, uh, right, to develop the software that was finally the core of Yahoo, right? But here they asked university to look at and then say, is there any ownership of university in this work that we have done, or the innovation that we have created? Now, the university concluded that no, the university does not have any ownership on the innovation of the IP generated, because the use of the only thing that the inventors, you know, did was they used the university computers, which was typically incidental. But everything else was not funded by the university, right? Now, funding could be directly through the uh, direct money, but it could be in other means also. But the university concluded that in this particular case, they did not own the IP, and hence Yahoo or these inventors were free to use that IP and create a startup around it, right? Although Stanford provided other help, and therefore it could be considered as an startup which came out of the university, but it is not an IP-led academic spin-off in the classic sense. In contrast, when you look at the Google's example, the inventor Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they worked on search engine during their as well during their university days. Now, the difference was these inventors, while working on when they were working on the government contract, um, or a project which was actually sponsored by government, and the element of their innovation actually came out from that research work, right? And so, and then university actually had filed the IP, and so university had the ownership of the IP, and all kinds of IP assets around this, right? So when it, and therefore the university owned that IP, and then it tried to license it out to companies, but at some point there was a decision made that looked like the inventors are the best, and are in best position to commercialize this particular technology, and hence they licensed that technology to inventors, and this company was formed, and we all know the history, right? Now, this is a classic example of IP-led academic spin-off, which we are talking about, wherein the IP which was generated at the university was transferred to the startup, and the business was created around it, right? And therefore you see there's a lot more benefit that came back to the university through this particular startup, right? And here also I think there is a very important role of how the IP was managed in this particular case, right? So I'll summarize this whole thing. I know I rushed through a few of these concepts, but I hope I was able to successfully give a broader picture on how the whole thing works. Um, as we discussed, IP-led academic spin-offs are less common, but they're quite significant, right? In terms of their impact and the value that it brings to the universities, right? It provides significant revenues as compared to licensing, all right? It brings in a lot of research grants because there's always a subsequent research that needed, and that comes back to the university. And if there is a university which is successful, or there is a startup which is successful, the inventors, the founders typically give a lot of philanthropic grants back to the university. And we have seen in case of Stanford, in case of University of California, San Diego, and many other universities. Of course, this is a source of local and national economic growth, because if a startup founded around IP gets created, then you typically see it becomes one of the big engines of growth in the locality. It's challenging, but it's worth the efforts. So I'll pause here for questions and comments, but I hope this gives some idea around what are the key elements and aspects of creating a startup based on IP generated at the university. And I'll be very happy to discuss your thoughts, comments, or challenges that you are facing, and we can kind of discuss whether it's around IP creation or whether it's about IP generation, IP, you know, commercialization or any other aspects. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nitin. Really appreciate it. So I'll tell the folks in the audience, please use Nitin's time. It's a very valuable his time, and you have like some 20 odd minutes. So please ask your questions in the chat, and I'm going to pick up some questions that we'll answer. So I can start, Nitin. I can break the ice before the audience, asks their questions. So my question is that I think you touched upon it, that academia has a lot of these patents which are paper patents, as in they are for CVs rather than actual commercialization intent. So now, what are the opportunities for industry to suppose buy those patents? Why would industry buy those patents, and why would industry not buy those patents, like never buy those patents?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think great question. I think typically at any university which has a good IP, I think there is always this dilemma, right? Whether you license it out or you create spin-offs, right? And similarly, when you look at the industry, I think if industry sees that there is a set of technology that's available and that's typically useful for their product line, I think that's a great incentive for them, right? Because depending on how they want to procure that IP, it could actually be a game changer for them. Now, I would say one of the criteria that industry would look at is what is the technology readiness level, right? So if a technology that's available for me to license as a company, and I can directly use it without too much of R&D or too much of it, then I think it's a great asset for me because I can then directly get benefit or commercialize it from it, right? So that's a great. I think it's like something which I would go for readily go for it, right? Now, if there is an effort needed from me as an industry to bridge that gap, then I may have to look at various other factors before deciding to pursue it, right? One could be, okay, what is the time frame I'm looking at to commercialize it, right? Is it, and during that time, do I have resources available for me to take chances and invest in it and see? So if I see a great game changing benefit from that in a year or two down the line using the technology, I would take that bet, right? But and then also I need to see what kind of support I may get from the university, right? As a during that aspect of bridging the gap, right? And that's where the IP contracts or the licensing contracts can be designed in a win-win situation, wherein the university licenses out the current product or a current technology to the industry and also help them commercialize it, right? So you could have an arrangement like that. So I think there are different factors which can be looked at, and arrangements can be tailored depending on the need of the industry. But the in a summary, I would say the closer the technology is to the product
Hmm.
that a company is working on, there's a
Hmm.
higher chances of accepting it immediately.
Great, great. Thank you. So we have Murli Menon. He's asking, how is IP typically valued and what are the challenges in this regard? So maybe you can just say, is it also useful for universities to value how they should do it? And what can be the usefulness of valuing the IP?
Yeah, I think great question again. I think this can be approached from a multiple ways, right? For example, if a university has a precedence on how they have licensed similar technologies, that could be a guiding factor, right? Number two, it's an economic exercise to see, okay, I have this particular technology. If this particular technology gets used in an existing product, what is that delta value that product will receive from this? And how much is a customer willing to pay out of it, right? So that's an economic exercise to understand what is that value that it brings to the customer and therefore to the company, and therefore what is that share that's more acceptable to for this arrangement, right? So that's on the things which are directly commercializable. Now, if it's a technology which is coming out from a pure fundamental research, and there is a effort needed to convert this research output, or this technical innovation into a product, right? Then you may not be able to receive, or university may not expect a full value in the beginning itself, but then can work it through various milestones, and then organize its payments, or its value through multiple milestones, and then finally get into the royalty mode as well, right? So depending upon what stage the technology is and what's the final value it aims to provide, right? You need to do that economic analysis to figure out the value, and then accordingly do the
Mhm.
set the percentage of value you get it, right? That's a short answer, but of course, maybe if more details
Mm.
are there, we can look at and then say, okay, in particular scenario, what works best. But you have lots of creative ways to design your IP licensing, right? Now, a lot of times people or negotiators think, or they take the approach of, okay, I should take the best, right? That doesn't work in general. Wherever the successful arrangements have been there, if you keep the goal that, hey, this particular technology has to be commercialized and should see, or should give the benefit to the end consumer, if both the parties go with that role, I think there's always a middle path, and they can arrive at the best approach. Because look, if you're licensing it out to a startup, you cannot expect a huge payment in the beginning, right? Or because it's a startup new product, and so you have to balance out the risk, and therefore you'll have a very different approach to licensing out to a startup as compared to something that you license out to a company, where you know that in 6 months a product will be out in the market and there's more certainty there. So no one percentage applicable to all scenarios, and there are different factors that you play around with. You have upfront licensing payment, you have milestone payments, you have your royalties around the sale, you could think of one time sale. There are different ways depending on how much risk one wants to assume, whether it's a licensor or
Mhm.
license. So a lot of these factors are there.
Yeah, we have one more good question. So, Coach for Change, please let me know the competencies required in TTO.
Okay, great. So one, TTO again depends on what's the size of innovations that this TTO has to handle. That decides the number of folks you want at the TTO, right? That's one thing. The second thing is, the person who is handling TTO should have a good understand, should be able to understand the innovation space, right? So if I'm working, let's say, in a electrical engineering space, I should be able to appreciate as a TTO the inventions, right? Understand the innovations. I should be able to market it to the relevant customers. So I need to be able to understand the market around those technologies, right? Or if I'm a electronics engineering, university, and I'm looking at innovations coming out in that space, and I should be able to understand that space, right? What kind of industry players are there who are using this technology, So I need to have a business understanding, right? I may need to have a bit of sales capability, right? It's one of the most difficult thing, right? If you can sell something to someone, then you actually have the greatest skill in the art, right? So I think it's a combination of your technology, then your IP prosecution, like patent prosecution or IP management skills, and then also some of the commercial and sales skills. Now, if it's a smaller TTO, you expect one person to do more, just like a startup wherein one guy wears many hats. Or if it's a bigger university, your TTO could actually hire a specialized person in each of these categories, right? But a TTO should have a skill set around technology that it needs to deal with, around the product marketing capabilities, like which is the technology marketing capabilities, which means understanding of the industry and the players, and also a bit of sales, and of course IP prosecution, right? Because this is the office which will do the prosecution. Of course, you can outsource it to patent agents or trademark agents or others, but you still need to understand every aspect of it because you prepare an IP strategy for the university and maybe the spin-offs.
Mhm. Mhm. Great, great. Thank you. So, Harshit, he asked this question earlier also. What do you think is the upcoming global requirement under the concept of electronics that would uh, enhance focus change? And what suggestion would you have to give to young students? Maybe you can like summarize it on your own. Suppose maybe what Qualcomm is interested in electronics, how you see the field of electronics, and probably some guidance to young electronics graduates.
So I would say, it is the read the book called Chip War, and you'll understand, right? A lot more about this whole thing, right? See, today everything that we use is based on semiconductors, right? During COVID times, we saw that there was a shortage of chips, which impacted every industry. So, which means this is a great central industry, right? Now, every country is trying to gain reliance in it on this, right? So then, which means every aspect of semiconductor industry is actually very valuable, and hence you will see that a lot more. I mean, if you're looking from opportunities in this space, then you have opportunities in all of these spaces, right? Now, you could look at emerging technologies, right? For example, today we are using semiconductor for mainly the computing aspects, right? Everything around computing, whether it's cars, whether it's IoT devices, whether it's smartphones or whatever it is, right? Cellular communication. What are the emerging technologies in the in the computing things? And quantum computing probably is the topmost or the mostly talked about ones, right? So researches are happening in that space. Is that technology ready for commercialization? Probably answer is no. What is the delta? It's open for everyone to understand. And if you are in that space, you should be. That's a great area to be in, right? And figure it out. So the promises that this particular technology is making uh, are humongous, right? So if anyone is able to crack it and make it industry ready, you are sitting on the gold, right?
Mhm.
And so there are many of these, right? So you start with the basic aspects of computational capabilities, and then you diverge into various other aspects of that, whether it's security, whether it's communication, whether it's storage, and all of that. So various ways to look at it, but I think this is one of the most exciting space in my opinion, right? Today, I mean, every government is talking about it, every company is talking about it. So yeah.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely. Last year we had a Independence Day webinar where Dr. Ajay Chaudhary, co-founder of HCL, he was also answering this particular question about electronics, and he's an advocate of quantum computing and
Yeah.
building products around electronics. So great, great, thank you. So Dr. Piyush Charan, I think. Uh, so let me try to understand the question. So patents can be disqualified at any point. Probably he's mentioning the risks related to spin-offs and early stage innovation activity with their own design, which is better and has tweaked my, or do you need to keep tweaking your innovation? How can spin-offs help? So I think it's about the risks. Like, is it
Okay.
a good idea for institutes?
So let me try to answer and then see if it answers the question. So when we look at IP, let's start, startups or anything around IP, right? Patents is a piece of it, not everything, right? And I think if you've done research in a particular area or if you have innovated in a particular space, your innovation will have multiple pieces, right? Some of those pieces will be protected by patents, some of them will be protected by copyrights, some of those will be protected by trademarks or some trade secrets and things like that. So you have a whole bouquet of IP, right? Um, because we're talking about research and then a research which is good research output which has some commercial viability, right? So you are looking at the whole packet. Point number one. Even if one of your patent gets invalidated, you are right. I think there's tons of prior art. It may happen, but the whole spin-off is not just relying on that one patent. Maybe your research is very good and it has resulted in multiple patents. So you're looking at portfolio, right? And I'm pretty sure that if you do good research, you will be sitting on something which is good fundamental, right? So that's one aspect. Now, is only patents enough? Answer is no. You will have a lot of things that you would have worked upon to make it commercially applicable. That becomes your trade secrets. That becomes your, you know, other aspects of IP, right? And hence you the more, that's where IP strategy is very important. I think one of the most less talked about aspects of IP management is the IP strategy, right? It's not just about creating a patent. It's also about everything around it. What are the, what are your key value propositions, right, that you're building, and so you'll have to, when you're looking at startup, you have to look at where is this key proposition in the startup, and you have to protect it. IP is one of form of it. There are other aspects of it, right? So yes, you're right, that's one of the risks, but it's very difficult to replicate everything around it, right? Okay, one patent got disqualified, but you have everything, so much else to protect your business and all that. And that's where a good IP strategy, a good business sales strategy will help. And every step of your startup journey, you will have to evaluate your assets, your risks, and how the industry is playing. Remember, every time I've seen a startup, I invest in a few startups. Every time I've seen in them, you started with an idea and a product, but by the time it reaches to the end customer, it changes a lot. And so you'll have to tweak it as you go along, right? And that's where you will see that your subsequent research after you started off could play an important role, right? Because there will be additional things that gets generated as you embark upon the journey to commercialize it, and there you can build fences around it. So you're right, there's a risk of patent getting to qualified, but I don't see it as a big risk. It's part of the game, right? It's part of the whole aspect of business. Patents do get invalidated every time, but then if you have a solid IP strategy around it, you will be prepared for it.
Yeah. So, Katta Trinath has this question: what are the typical sources of funding for academic spin-off? How do they secure investment from VCs, grants, or other sources?
Yeah, good news is that there are more funds available than the takers, right? Of course, you may hear that, okay, last year funding got dried up, but believe me or not, if there is a good idea available or a good potential available in a startup or in a tech space, you will find more than what you need, or more funding than what you need. That's point number one. Now, how do you get it, right? And that's where this whole thing that we talked about of creation of spin-offs, right, helps. If you've done your study that what are my strengths, what is the ecosystem player here, right? Remember the first step. Then you look at the second step. Assume you have worked on an applied research, so you have an understanding of your ecosystem, you have an understanding of what research you are doing and what problems you're solving, you have an understanding of what IP assets are being created, and you have understanding of what and how I will commercialize it. If you have a whole coherent story to tell, the majority of the investors will get convinced. Investors typically back two things on two things, right? One, what is that value proposition you've created? And IP-led academic spin-offs, the one of the main value proposition is the core innovation that has come out. You have to sell that innovation to them. Number two, more importantly, it's the people and the team that investors back on, right? The value of ideas in majority of the startups is nil, I would say. It's the team which does it, right? But in IP-led academic spin-off, the idea has a good portion of value proposition because here you have innovated on something, right? So if you are able to sell that coherent story, and if you think that you have a team that can deliver, because remember, as I said, it's not just about the technology. It's about how good salesman you are, how good product marketer you are, right? How good you understand the system needs of the customer and all that. If you're able to sell that story, you will get funding. There is no dearth of funding, I can tell you.
Yeah, yeah. I have one question regarding contracts. So, a lot of institutes struggle with the fact that the contracts are a bit iffy because, like, there was this Yahoo and Google example you shared that the resources were used, but the actual IP was not owned by the institutes. So, any thoughts you have related to contracts? How institutes should go about it so that there's a systematic process that they with the inventors.
So I think basically, as I said, right, if you just again going back to our process, right, if you have clarity on who is bringing what on the table, right, IP system is a great way to ensure that whoever is bringing the value gets protected, right? Now, if you are research institute, right, go as the step one, right? What is that value this team is bringing in, right? Research, the researchers and all that. What is the infrastructure that it's bringing in? Where is the fund coming from? So there are 3 or 4 players here. You have university providing infrastructure. You have innovators or researchers providing that intellectual capability. You have maybe funder providing the funds, right? Now, one element is there, right? Who's providing what there? So you will basically have to arrange all this, right? Then, assuming all that aspect is clear, then your research output then determines what kind of IP is generated, right? Who is going to use that as IP to commercialize it? Is it the funder? Is it going back to the funder? If that is the case, then if you have that clarity in the mind in the beginning itself, when you are accepting the funds, you'll design all this, right? You'll design a framework wherein you will have a framework to say that this is what will be the if this is the outcome, this is how we'll approach, because you don't know what's the research outcome, what kind of IP it will be generated, but you can decide on the framework. Hey, we are working on this framework. This is what I bring on the table as a university. This is what researchers are bringing on the table, and all that, right? So no one solution fits all. I think you'll have to look at doing the whole process. That's what I said. At every stage, every aspect that we discussed, there are important considerations that one should keep in mind looking at the final end, right? And what do you want to do this? See, I always tell everyone, it's not about just filing the patents, because you can get a patent if you meet legal requirements. What are legal requirements? Novelty, utility, non-obviousness, and subject matter reliability. It doesn't mean if you are legally allowed to get it, that means you should get it, because it involves expenses. It becomes a white horse soon. See, I have 10,000 rupees. I can go buy 10 shirts, but I don't buy it because I don't need it. Legally, I'm allowed to buy 10 shirts. So I am creating, if I have this creation of IP in mind, if I have to do research in mind, I have to have an end goal to it. What is my end goal? And if my end goal is to commercialize whatever I'm generating in terms of research technology or a technological output or a technical solution, then I have to look at all this, because I'm talking about commercial aspects of it. So at every stage which we talked about, you will have to keep all these things in mind. Right? It's not that I created a great product and world will come at my feet and take it and pay me money. It will never happen. You see great products coming out in the market which are technically superior but don't do well in the market. Why? Because the other aspects were not taken care of it well. So many times you see great products fail, but mediocre products succeed. Because the sales guy is so good, he will sell you the crap.
So many factors.
So coming back to your question, every aspect, your contracts, of course, will have to keep in mind that these are the possibilities, and I design a framework as and when as and when the clarity emerges, we have a framework to address it,
Yeah.
right? And
So
if you have great parties, right, you will ensure that I don't kill the my golden goose to get one
mm,
vote, right? And if parties approach with that mindset, you have great relations comes out of it.
mhm.
You have great examples of win-win situations that have come out. Not everybody thinks that, okay, I just take everything now, and that's where the
Mhm.
great, if you have a good understanding, you can make other party understand. Look, you take this part, give it to me this, because it will come back to you in this form, right? And I think
Yeah.
those things succeed a lot. I mean, if you go with that approach, it's a great.
Yeah, with good negotiations, or anything is possible. Really, I mean, uh, actually, somebody asked this question. I am not able to find it, but I think they were asking about success stories in India. Do you know how it is going in India? IITs, any institutes you are mentoring, or in general, what your views are related to spin-offs in India?
Okay, maybe I'll get back to you in the towards the later part, because there are, okay. So I'll answer in two ways, right? Yes, there are certain institutes which are doing amazing job in terms of commercializing IP and spin-off. I do not have a permission to talk about them, unfortunately, but once I take it from them, and if I'm allowed to disclose some of these things, I can certainly share that. But in India, there are certain institutes which are doing amazing work in terms of solving practical problems, and therefore commercializing the innovations that coming out of it. Of course, we are, as a country, we are relatively new in this space, and hence you may not see bigger names as of now, but it's happening. So um, I'll take this question as my homework, and I'll maybe, Rahul, through you, we can get back to it with
Sure,
whatever
sure,
we can.
absolutely. So thank you so much, Nitin. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your valuable views on this topic. I want to thank all the participants who joined today. I want to thank Qualcomm for supporting this event. You can sign up, everyone, from the L2 Pro platform. The link to that is in the description. There are basic, intermediate, and advanced courses created by top experts from National Law University, Delhi. And it is all, the platform is supported by Qualcomm. It is supported by CPAM, the Self of IPR Promotion and Management, under DPIIT. So once you do these courses, they are all self-paced. You can get a very valuable certificate. The platform is free of charge. So it's a very good deal that you get. So please check out the description for the link. Register now. Don't delay it. So yeah, with this, folks, everybody who's watching, I wish you great success for your innovations. I wish you a very happy Independence Day. I hope you'll use these sessions to, as motivation to move from theory to practice, and to basically create your own spin-offs. Nitin already said that there are some institutes who are doing it. So most definitely things are happening, and hopefully you will take this as motivation to create your own spin-off. So thank you, everybody. Jai Hind. And I let Nitin speak any last words, if you have, before
Sure. No,
concluding.
no, thank you, Rahul, and thank you everyone for joining. I think this is an area which I love to talk about, and I think something that our country needs, definitely. So I hope what we shared was useful to you. And if you still have any questions that are unanswered, feel free to reach out after this session, and we can always have a good conversation around it. But all the best, and there's nothing right or wrong in this space. As I said, it's a very creative space. We can always adapt the process and approach to suit our own needs. Uh, it's a bit challenging, but I think it's worth doing. So all the best, and uh, look forward to interact with you again at some point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the comments. I see so many good comments. I cannot put them all on screen. But goodbye. Have a great evening, and see you in future Turnip events and courses. Bye bye.
Thank you.